A robin might attack its own reflection in the glass, or a stray red sock left drying on a line, mistaking the fabric for a rival. And minutes later, that same bird can sense the Earth's magnetic field with precision, tapping into physics humanity only recently began to understand, alongside quantum computers. A tiny bird brain that sometimes gets it hilariously wrong, and sometimes solves a puzzle that took scientists decades to crack. Today we're looking at how a robin perceives the world, and why that perception sometimes fails her, and sometimes makes her almost supernatural. The European robin holds a territory year-round, both the male and the female, each on their own. That's rare among songbirds. Most species only need territory during the breeding season, but for the robin, it's a matter of survival. In winter, territory is purely about food. A mate comes later. Among most European songbirds, only males sing in winter. In robins, both sexes do, and the female's song is just as loud and aggressive as the male's. In playback experiments, females respond to an intruding song just as fiercely as males, regardless of whether the recording is male or female. When a male starts singing in spring, inviting a female onto his territory, her first reaction isn't interest, it's aggression. She attacks him exactly as she would attack any intruder. The territorial instinct fires before she even recognizes him as a potential mate. The male doesn't back off. He starts feeding her again and again until her aggression turns to tolerance, then acceptance. By the time the pair is formed, he's providing up to a third of her diet. He wins her over with food, not display. Only the female builds the nest, in dense, well-hidden cover. If she's disturbed at this stage, she'll abandon it without hesitation and start over somewhere else. She lays 4 to 6 eggs and incubates them for about 13 days, during which the male feeds her up to 3 times an hour. After the chicks hatch, the female immediately removes the eggshells from the nest. Carrying them away means leaving no clue for predators about where to look. Both parents feed the chicks. After 13 to 14 days, the young fledge, but the parents, mostly the male, keep feeding them for another 2 to 3 weeks, especially if the female has already started a second clutch. In a good season, robins can raise 2, sometimes 3 broods. Some males, when resources allow, manage to feed 2 nests at once, with 2 different females. But that's a rare exception. Typically, a robin pair stays strong and together for the whole season. Behind this fierce defensive territory lies a specific reason. In winter, when cover is scarce and sparrowhawks hunt small birds, especially hard, a territory with enough shelter near feeding spots becomes a matter of survival, not just comfort. That's what fuels the fights over territory we'll see in the next episode. The robin's territorial instinct responds to one single visual trigger, the color red, rather than to the intruding bird itself. And this works so literally that it has become a classic case study in ornithology. In experiments, researchers placed a headless, beakless, eyeless mount on a robin's territory, just a tuft of rust-red feathers on a stick. The bird attacked it with the same fury as a live rival. Nearby they placed a full robin mount, but with a dulled, muted breast, and it drew almost no reaction at all. It turned out to be entirely about the color, not the shape of the bird. Robins attack their own reflection in a window or a car's side mirror, mistaking it for an intruder. There are documented cases of a robin attacking an ordinary red sock hung out to dry on a line. This trait has a flip side, one that concerns not intruders, but the robin's own chicks. Robin chicks are born without a single red feather. They're mottled and brown, fully camouflaged. This continues for several weeks after they leave the nest. The reason is simple. If a chick showed red too early, an adult bird, including its own parents, would perceive it as a rival and could attack it. Territorial clashes among robins go well beyond display and song. Fights can be real and brutal, and current estimates suggest that up to 10% of adult robin deaths happen in territorial conflicts with other robins. The red patch on a robin's chest works as an honest badge of age and experience. As a bird ages and wins more fights, the red patch grows larger, and other robins can read its size to know exactly who they're dealing with: a newcomer or a veteran of many territorial battles. In cities, robins often sing not just at dawn, but deep into the night, under streetlights, in places where the usual daytime quiet never really arrives. For a long time, the explanation seemed simple. Artificial light throws off the bird's internal clock, tricking it into mistaking night for dawn. The logic seemed convincing. Light is present, so the body decides it's time to sing. But a study by Fuller, Warren, and Gaston, published in Biology Letters in 2007, tested this idea against data from many urban territories and found a different pattern. The deciding factor turned out to be noise, not light. Birds whose territories are drowned in constant daytime traffic noise shift their singing to the quiet night hours, simply so they can actually be heard. Streetlight exposure turned out to be a far weaker predictor than daytime noise levels. Tellingly, this isn't a settled question even now. The noise and light hypotheses are still debated in parallel, with no clear consensus on which factor dominates in any given case. There's another detail that connects this adaptation to the territorial behavior from the previous chapter. A study from the University of Southampton around 2012 found that robins whose territories sit near streetlights and in noisy areas show less aggression toward a decoy rival playing back an intruder's song. In other words, urban noise and light don't just shift when a robin sings. They seem to make it less territorially aggressive, even when a real rival shows up nearby. The European robin is one of the few wild birds that lets a human get remarkably close. A gardener starts digging a flower bed, and within a minute or two, a robin is already there, snatching worms turned up by the spade just a few steps away. No other garden bird behaves this fearlessly around people. This isn't tameness in the modern sense, and it isn't learned familiarity with humans. It's an evolutionary inheritance far older than gardening itself. In the dense forests of Europe, where the species evolved, robins spent centuries following large digging animals, wild boars, deer, that broke up the ground with their snouts or hooves and exposed insects and worms on the surface. A bird that stayed close to such a digger got access to food with almost no effort. That's how the pattern locked in. A large animal disturbs the soil, and prey appears right beside it. Thrushes, blackbirds, dunnocks lived in the same forests alongside the same boars, but never developed such a close bond. One possible explanation is the robin's unusually large eyes. Boars feed most actively at dawn and dusk, in the darkest hours of the forest day, and those large eyes may have let the robin, unlike other birds, spot prey a boar had just exposed in that low light. A human with a spade in a garden falls into this same ancient pattern. The robin doesn't distinguish a gardener from a boar in terms of the behavioral trigger. It simply reacts to the fact that the soil has been disturbed. There's an unexpected twist that confirms this story from the opposite direction. On the European continent, where wild boars are still common, robins stay loyal to the original. They keep following real boars in the forest and stay cautiously distant from humans. In Britain, boars were wiped out centuries ago, while gardens are everywhere, and gardeners filled the vacancy left by the large digger. That's exactly why a British robin will sit 2 steps from a person, while its continental relative won't, because a real boar is still out there, and it simply doesn't need the human substitute. Everything before, territory, red color, city noise and light, boars in the garden, was perception in the ordinary sense: sight, hearing, pattern recognition. The robin's last channel of perception is built so differently that for a long time people simply refuse to believe it. The robin senses Earth's magnetic field, not in a figurative sense, literally through a protein in its retina called cryptochrome. Blue light triggers a pair of electrons inside it into a special quantum state, sensitive to how the magnetic field around the bird is oriented. This tiny quantum difference, it's believed, overlays onto the bird's ordinary visual picture. The robin literally sees lines of the magnetic field layered over the familiar image of the world: the garden, the branch, the silhouette of a man with a spade. The first proof of this ability came back in the last century. Scientists Wolfgang and Roswitha Wilczko showed that a robin in a sealed chamber, with no visual landmarks at all, still unerringly chooses its migratory direction, relying only on the invisible field. Next, researchers needed to prove this was quantum mechanics at work, not something simpler. In 2014, Henrik Moritzen created weak radio frequency interference near the birds, too weak to affect anything except the delicate quantum state of the electrons. The robin instantly lost its sense of direction, as if its compass had been taken away for a moment. In 2021, a paper in Nature described the mechanism itself in molecular detail. How light activates cryptochrome and sets off this entire chain of reactions in the retina. 3 independent lines of evidence, behavioral, radiofrequency, and molecular, converge on one conclusion. The small bird outside your window, the one that can be fooled by a red sock, is at the same time harnessing one of the most delicate physical effects in the universe. The robin's perception works on the same principle in all 5 stories. It doesn't react to reality itself, but to a signal its brain has learned to read as important. A color, a sound, disturbed Earth, the direction of magnetic lines. Sometimes that signal fails her in the silliest way. A piece of fabric on a line becomes an enemy. Her own reflection becomes an invader. And sometimes that very same system works with such precision that it took people over half a century to unravel the mechanism, physics and all. The difference between a ridiculous mistake and a scientific marvel isn't in the robin herself. She always acts the same way, trusting her senses completely. The difference is in which signal she happens to be dealing with at that particular moment: a sock on a line or the magnetic field of an entire planet.